after finishing school, I was contemplating the priesthood, and I went to me parish priest, Kerry Barter, and he said, "Oh, good on you, mate. That's great. Start coming to Mass every day, and I want you to do some teaching in state schools. I want you to go and be a catechist," which I did, which he probably didn't realise was making me going to go, "I don't want to be a priest, Father Kerry. I really want to be a teacher. I love this. I love it," you know, and that's what I did. So I went into teaching. And after uni, my first experience of teaching was a place called Freeman Catholic High School. And it was an amazing school. And it was actually, the principal there was someone who taught me at De La Salle. His name's Peter Turner. He's the boss in the Wollongong Diocese these days. And it was an amazing school to start teaching at. First year out saw me teaching geography, history, PE, music, English and RE. And I was taking the cricket side too, which is pretty good for someone who was trained in economics and geography. But I loved it, and I particularly loved the teaching of RE. And the thing that Peter committed to on the timetable was that on every class there were two people who were teaching RE. Usually a young, inexperienced teacher with someone else who was a bit more experienced, and your team taught. And if you were on, and I'm sorry, my experience is secondary, if you're on Year 8 RE, well, there were 12 of you, and we regularly got them together, and we'd be putting on skits and role plays and giving our stories. And it was like being on youth mission team or net, but within a school. And the people that you were on the U team with were the ones that were delivering this 3 times a week to these kids in these classes. And often you have lessons in single classrooms, and then it was an amazing place to cut your teeth on religious education. We didn't always get it right, certainly not, but there was something very, very authentic about doing that. It was costly on the timetable, and there might be a couple of principals in here going, "Oh yeah, how do you do that with a timetabling situation?" But it was incredible. Another experience I had in another school was a school very much where they had social justice initiatives that opened the door very much to students engaging with faith. It was I'll put it as it was, they were rich kids. They were rich kids, they were pretty well to do, they were pretty cool, and a lot harder to speak to than the kids. A lot more hard to break through than some of the kids I'd engaged with in Western Sydney, that's for sure. But that was still powerful in itself, getting kids to engage with social justice initiatives as a way of opening the door to talking about faith. Another thing that I found really difficult to do, and I suppose that's where I'm leading with this, is not in the first school, but in the second school I was at, was moving to staff where I'd got this gig as an REC and I was still pretty young. So having this REC was talking to all these older teachers, trying to get them to share their own personal faith. And for some of them, they were just so uncomfortable with it, you know. The reason was relatively simple. Some didn't know where they stood on the faith stuff. They just didn't know. Others didn't feel confident to. Some were obviously disconnected from church. And most seemed pretty happy most of the time to toe the party line as far as the church was concerned. But for some of them, and I'm not talking all of them, I'm by any stretch of imagination, but there was enough there where it just was difficult to get that critical mass of people who were moving into a vibrant expression of personal faith. I found that hard as a young REC. At that point in time, I was given the opportunity to be on the Sydney Catholic Education Office audit team, and you'd go around to schools and you'd have a look at their programs and the reports that they'd written and all their resources and all that sort of stuff. And one thing became really obvious to me was that most schools are really good at dotting their I's and crossing their T's when it comes to all of that programming stuff. And that's really, really critical. But more importantly for me was I got to talk to and interview some of these really experienced RE teachers in a whole variety of really good schools around Sydney. And I felt privileged to do it because I'm just this young kid coming through and going, what am I doing here talking to you guys? You've been doing this for much longer than me. But it was obvious that they knew that the most effective things in schools weren't necessarily the things that they were talking about in the classroom, but what they were able to share from their own personal journey with students. And if you can do both, then that was very telling. And I'll come back to that theme a little bit later. The school that I came to after that was a school that was a pretty big sports school in Sydney. Some of you might have heard of St Gregory's College, Campbelltown. It's a Mara school. I just loved the joint. It was just the dream job for me, where I got music, sport, faith. That's your job. It was just unreal. And the boss there, when I came in and started as director of mission, he said, not what are you going to do in RE, not what programs, what are you thinking about with social justice? He said, what sport are you going to take? Now, what? It seemed like a really funny question to ask your new director of mission as he'd come into your office for the first time after the interview. And his attitude pretty much was, listen, mate, you got a bunch of 1,200 boys out there who love nothing more than running around a football field, and most of the staff, they're here because they love coaching them. What sport are you going to take? And I said, cricket. I go all right at cricket. I reckon I'll be able to take a team. And I did. And I took second grade and then first grade, and these guys won everything. They were winning combined Catholic college, Marist colleges, they were New South Wales All Schools champs. They were just ridiculously good cricketers and football players and AFL players. I wasn't worried about the winning. What I was worried about, the fact that because you coach them and you meet them where they're at, all of a sudden all these conversations open up in RE classes or in the playground, or when I'm standing up in front of an assembly at Easter and talking about what this means. You've got street credibility with kids. You've got all this, you've already connected with them at a different level, and they go, oh yeah, we know you. You're the one running around on the cricket field. You're the one who's taking us for training all the time. And that connection's just amazing. It doesn't have to be sport, it can be a variety of different things. But meeting them where they are at is critical. And that was a great learning for me. In this school that I was at too, the liturgies were amazing. I'm not going to say it any other way. We use really vibrant sort of music for our masses. We pull stuff straight out of Hillsong, and we use that stuff in our masses at St Greg's, and they lift the roof off. Other schools used to come. The bishop would just look forward to. He'd come up looking to us, what day do your masses on this year? And he'd want to be there. And they would absolutely lift the roof off with some fantastic, vibrant musicians who knew all about worship. And the kids, even though they weren't coming to mass, they felt something. They felt something. There was nothing for these kids to be walking out of big masses that we'd have every single term. We'd have a singing practice the day before. There was just as much excitement about going to singing practice. I know that seems weird at a big footy buff school, but this was part of the culture of the place. Absolutely part of the culture of the place. And it's a feature of a lot of schools, and I know that the Marist brothers seem to nail this absolutely. They really do. And these kids will look forward to going to mass. That led me to a point where they were just feeling something. When the cross and icon came around in 2008, it was just ridiculous. It was just so powerful in terms of the spirit that was in that place. And it led me to a point in that school of doing something that I'd never ever thought of doing before. Because I knew I had about probably 30% of kids who were coming to the school who weren't Catholic, and the rest of them, well, the figures would be the same, very few who were probably attending mass every weekend. And I threw it out there and I said, listen, do any of you guys want to become Catholic? I threw it as a message, about 2 lines into the daily bulletin one day. I had 18 kids say, sir, before I do year 12, I want to become Catholic. And I had 3 staff come up and go, can we do it too? It blew me away. It absolutely blew me away. I had 3 staff members who'd been part of the culture of this place. And I didn't know they weren't Catholic. I just assumed they were. Can we do it too? It was just the most incredible experience for me. And it was in my last year at that school. If I was there, I'd still be doing it. But then I got the opportunity to work for Bishop Peter Ingham. So I left, I think, the best school in Australia, I reckon it was, to go and work for this incredible bishop. As I said earlier, I've got a lot to learn from catechists. We've got 600 in our diocese. There's a few that were getting their awards. A few older faces there. We've got a few young ones coming through in the last few years because we've opened it up to guys from university, and we're now getting kids in year 10 and year 11 to come and be our catechists as well, as a bit of their social justice and outreach in their schools. So we've got about 80 of them that are coming in and teaching kindergarten and year 1, and they love it. And you can imagine the kids love having them come into the state school classrooms. Now, like in Catholic schools, we know in state schools that the kids we've got coming to our classes come from a broad range of faith experiences. Some go to mass every weekend, not many. There are plenty for whom are hearing the word Jesus for the first time in these classes where it's not a swear word. Simple as that. There are plenty of them that are hearing the stories that are in our Gospels and the Scriptures, and even though they're coming from a Catholic background, because this isn't compulsory. You elect to come to this. Their parents are saying, well, you know, we want you to go this week, sort of from Catholic back. So we know that these kids, this is often the first encounter that they have with faith. Catechists understand the need to authentically support our parents in the choices they're making for this. Now, I'm just going to put this one out there. I'm not picking a fight. Well, maybe I am. One thing that amazed me when I started in this ministry was the realisation that at the start of every single year, I had to get every one of my 600 catechists authorised again to teach about the Catholic faith in a state school. They've got to go and get a green card that the government says to them, your priest has got to tell me every single year that you're connected and practising your faith. I was putting that one out there. It took me by surprise a little bit, and it made me think I never had to do that for any of my Catholic school teachers. Maybe once with a question at a job interview. But I had to do it every single year for these guys. And the other thing that really got to me about these guys is that I didn't have to talk any single one of them into becoming a RE teacher. They came to me. They wanted to be a teacher. And don't get me wrong, there were plenty of people tripping them over themselves too in Catholic schools to teach RE in secondary schools. I know in primary schools, everyone does it. But one of the hardest times for me every single year was when November and December was coming around and you're doing the timetable for next year, and I had to go to someone and say, will you teach religious education for me? And it was as if I'd thrown a bunch of spiders all over them. And I really had to talk people. And some people would be so relieved when I come up and say, listen, next year I think I'm right. I don't think you have to teach religious education next year. And when we bring that sort of an attitude to it in some of our schools, and it's not everyone, I'll tell you, it is not. I'm not picking fights. I love Catholic schools. I'm a product of them. I brag about them. But I knew I had that going on every single year, where I had people in front of classes who either didn't believe it, weren't totally convinced themselves, weren't confident in it, and they knew themselves that they were struggling to be authentic witnesses. I'm not picking a fight. I'm just telling you how it is. They tell me that that's how it is. It took me by surprise a little bit, I've got to be honest, that there was that requirement from the state government for our Catholic teachers to go into state schools. And these catechists reminded me a little bit of this little story I'm going to tell you. Bear with me. You might have heard it before. Because they weren't going in confident like us teachers. They weren't going in trained. They weren't going in with all of the skills and the bells and whistles that we have. But they did go in full of belief. I'll go through this one with you. You might want to close your eyes. It's up to you. Some years ago, it's called the Old Reverend. Some years ago, at a social function in England, a great actor was asked to recite something for the pleasure of his fellow guests. He consented. He asked if there was anything special which his audience would like to hear. An aged minister who was present arose and said, "Could you, sir, recite the 23rd Psalm?" And the great actor replied, "I can and I will, my friend. But after I've finished, will you do the same?" And the minister reluctantly consented. Impressively, the great actor recited the psalm. His voice was imperfect. His intonation was flawless. The audience was spellbound. As he finished, the guests applauded. Then the aged minister arose and he began to recite the psalm. His voice was not remarkable. His intonation was not faultless. But when he finished, there was no applause. There was silence. Many heads were bowed in reverence. The great actor again arose to his feet and with great emotion he said, "My friends, I've reached your ears and your eyes, but the minister has reached your hearts. The difference is this. I know the 23rd Psalm, but he knows the shepherd." Now, I love that story, and I'd love to think that it's true. It may or may not be, but I have no doubt that it grows from truth. A truth I see very powerfully in the witness of catechists and very much powerfully too in the witness of authentic teachers in Catholic schools. But the one thing I've learnt from catechists is that they're prayerful. They know the shepherd. They're prayerful and they're formed in faith by the sacraments. Okay. The words of Pope Paul VI scream loudly. I know that's Pope Benedict XVI, but that's my bishop up there and he's a champion. And each of our popes, as I said, have been saying this in their own way. But Pope Paul VI pretty much said what is the heart of that poem. People today listen more willingly to witnesses than they do to teachers. And if they do listen to teachers, it's precisely because they are witnesses. And I can't help but think to myself, what would happen if not all of our teachers, but a critical mass of teachers in every single Catholic school were at a point in their faith where it was so alive and so real that the vast majority of other teachers and students in that school were going, I want what they've got. Madness? No. Just time to get a little bit heroic, because if we had people from K to 12, from PE to economics, from geography to history to whatever it is, whatever you're teaching, living a life that is vibrant and that is faithful, kids would very much get attracted to this and be drawn into this sense of God's love. And I've got 5 minutes, so I've got to cut to the chase. I love that little picture there of St. Peter. It says a lot to me about what it means to be a participant in the new evangelisation. Let's get one thing straight. Being an authentic person, an authentic disciple who participates in the new evangelisation does not mean being perfect. No way. Our imperfections and contradictions don't give us the opportunity to opt out. Peter tried that when he first encountered Jesus on the shore of the beach after he'd been fishing all night and got nothing, and Jesus said, "Throw him over the other side, champ," and the nets came in busting. His response was like many of our responses. Leave me, Lord. I am a sinful man. In other words, I'm not up to this. I can't do it. I'm not good enough. You don't know the truth of who I am. I'm not authentic enough. Jesus' response to that is, come, follow me. Authentic witnesses make a decision, a commitment at some point in time. They really come to embrace and make their faith their own. I wonder how many of us, I'm sure plenty of us in this room, but I wonder how many of our teachers in our schools have had that opportunity as adults and after a serious encounter with God and the Holy Spirit to make a decision, an authentic witness, to say, hey, I want to grow in this. I want you to walk beside me. And every time I'm going to an RE lesson, I want you there with me, being led by the Holy Spirit. To do that, authentic witnesses that we're called to be in Catholic schools are called to be prayerful. And Pope Francis is directing us so much to prayerfulness. No Bible, no brekkie. No morning prayer, well, there's no way you can have purpose when you go into those classrooms. And so it's really critical. And I'm talking about what we're doing as individuals here. I'm not talking about edicts that we give to staff in staff meetings. Authentic witnesses have got to be coming from individual people, individual Catholics who love Jesus, who love their church, and every single school being part of something that's led by the Holy Spirit. It takes courage, no doubt about it. I've been in those staff rooms and those staff meetings where you've got to stand up and say something that really challenges people in their faith, and I've felt very much like that cat a number of times. But sometimes you've just got to say what needs to be said. Sometimes you just got to say it. I hope you don't get devoured along the way. But even if you do, you've still got to say it. Authentic witnesses are very much connected to Eucharist. You can't say it any other way. And I know that plenty of people in our schools don't get Eucharist either. I know that there'll be plenty of people in our schools who are not regular attenders at Mass. As I said, our catechists are, they've got to be. The state government makes me sign off on that every single year for every 600 of them. In our Catholic schools, we need to be drawn back into that. And I'd say to teachers, if they're not, you've got to change that. You've got to change that. But that's not an easy step. In fact, it's a big jump sometimes for people that actually haven't had a serious encounter with grace and with faith. So that's why having faith communities within your schools, having vibrant faith communities, perhaps you've helped to start and initiate those, where people can come together and pray as a staff and be drawn into a deeper faith so they get to understand Eucharist is really important. Eucharist is so critical, but so is forgiveness. I love that line from Pope Francis, pretty much where he says, we should keep going to reconciliation. God doesn't get tired of forgiving. We just get tired of asking. I tell you what, I've got to go to Reco so often. And there's a long period of time in my life when I didn't. And it just allows you to be separated from God. And how good does it feel when you walk out of it? It's got nothing to do with that Catholic guilt rubbish that you hear people touting around all the time. It's the opposite of that. It's throwing all that off. Absolutely just frees you up to be able to be a warrior in the kingdom. It's like getting the magic sponge on the footy field. Right, I'm ready to go again. That's what Reco does for you. Absolutely. Giving from what you've got as a catechist means doing all of these, as a catechist, as an authentic witness means doing all of these things. All of these things. I can't help but think what our parishes, what our schools would be like, what our church would be like if our Catholic schools were brim full of authentic witnesses. I think they'd be places, first of all, where they'd be supporting, nurturing communities, where you do have prayer groups within your school, where those who are really committed are drawing others in voluntarily, not a quick Hail Mary before a staff meeting. Where you're really drawing people into faith, because our teachers need formation in faith as well. They're hungry for it. They're a microcosm of society. They're just as hungry as our kids and our families, many of them. But in our Catholic schools, we have got a critical mass of people that if they realise what their role is, they could do this. They could do this. I'd hope they become places where there's solid teaching and practice. Where if a kid's asked a really good question about a moral issue, or if a kid asks a really good question about faith, they get a good answer, not fobbed off because I don't know the answer. They get a good answer. And if you don't know the answer, that you come back to them. Kids ask really good questions and they deserve really good answers. That's what authentic teachers do. I'd hope they become places where parents are welcomed willingly. I'd love to be in if they'd chuck me back in a school, I'd love to run stuff for parents regularly, where you get them in and say, hey, listen, let's do a session on raising kids. Hey, let's do a session on discipline at home, and just drag our faith into it. Let's do a session on adequately dealing with your finances. All the sort of stuff that, dare I say it, Hillsong does, and they're going there in droves. Our Catholic schools could absolutely be places where that sort of engagement about stuff that matters to the average mum and dad are not hearing. I'm sorry, they're not hearing it when they're going to Mass. And our Catholic schools can be places about speaking about stuff that draws them back into relevant things that affect their lives, and then hopefully back into Mass. I hope there'll be places where all of our personal gifts can be used. Some of the best teachers I've ever had in Catholic schools have been non-Catholics, but they've been really committed to other faiths, and they've shown Catholics plenty of stuff about what it means to tell their story. And this is the next one for me. The power of testimony, and then we're going to have to go, I think. How good would it be in our schools, in our Catholic schools, if we as teachers were willing to share our own personal faith? I used to be very comfortable in getting up and talking about New Testament studies, or teaching about morality, or St Matthew's Gospel, or let's have a look at social justice. They didn't know anything about me and my faith. And at one point in time, after my brother-in-law, who had become a Catholic, I didn't push him into a corner and say, you better become a Catholic before you marry my sister, mate. I didn't do that. He became of his own volition, very much so, and asked some really good questions. In fact, I said to him, don't you dare do it because you think I want you to. You're full of faith. But he did become a Catholic. In fact, both my brothers-in-law did. And he was teaching an evangelical school in Sydney, an Anglican evangelical school. He said, Jude, they want me to get up in an assembly and give my testimony. Apparently this was something they did every week. A member of staff got up and gave their testimony, or a senior student got up and gave their testimony. And I've gone, what? At school? He said, yeah, you should see it. It's amazing. All these kids just listening to this teacher. I thought, wow. I started doing it in my RE lessons. I'd always get the fun classes, the Year 9 Friday afternoon stuff. The sweat hogs, for those who used to watch Welcome Back, Cotter. And I tell you what, I started sharing with these kids my personal faith, and they were into it. Straight away, it's not just a subject for them. They knew that you were talking about something that's not another topic like geography or history. This is who you are. The most powerful experiences I've had with kids have been on retreat experiences where you can get to a point of listening to testimony. How powerful would our schools be, our churches be, if we gave our testimony? Kath Kennedy asked me to speak at Credo 18 months ago. She said, well, Jude, will you get up and give your testimony? I'm going, what? Don't you want me to get up and talk about atheism or, I don't know, no, I want you to give your testimony. And it really challenged me, because we don't do it. But Pope Francis and our church, and I'm sorry, I speak Protestant, my Protestant brothers and sisters, they're doing something right here by sharing their story. People don't come to faith because I win an argument with them. I spent 20 years winning arguments about faith and the fact that I'm Catholic and I'm right. And you know what? Do you know how many people I won across to Catholicism through that? 0. But as soon as I started a conversation about, well, this is me and this is my faith. This is what it means to me. Oh, really? You've brought them into an understanding of who you are. Then I can talk to them about the other stuff. I'm sort of done winning arguments. Is that madness? Absolutely not. And I would have said so many other things about what I'd love to see in schools see happen. But if they can become places where an individual RE lessons in staff rooms, imagine that assembly. Some teacher actually getting up and saying, hey, I just want to talk to you about my faith. This is me. This is why I believe. Can you imagine how many kids will be drawn into a conversation with that? And it's happening in some schools. It's happening in some schools, and it's very much at the heart of the new evangelisation. Okay, but you can't give what you haven't got. You just can't. And so it means in being an authentic disciple, we've got to be committed to our own personal formation and prayerfulness. Sacrament, absolutely critical. Reconciliation, scripture. And if we had a critical mass of people within our own Catholic schools doing that, even if there's only 4 or 5 on a particular staff that meet together regularly and draw others in, look, I'm telling you, if you invite the Holy Spirit into that, you're going to be lighting fires in every single school and right throughout the church. That would absolutely change the nature of the church.